Warning. Pro-Tri News is a podcast with different opinions, knowledge, and possibly fake news about triathlon racing. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and some stories may be dramatized for comedic effect. Enjoy.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Pro-Tri News. I'm your host. We have the usual gang here, Kyle, Pat, and Mark, and kind of a special edition episode. We try to do this once or twice a year, and we're debating. Sam decided to sit down with us. We were debating having you on, but you didn't have a whole lot of news, and then all of a sudden you had a whole lot of news. So, congrats on that. Firstly, did you have a chance to listen to our podcast last week?
I did. I had 3 different people message me saying, please make sure you listen to the podcast. And so I not only did I listen to it on my way back from Doha on Sunday, and I almost wanted to take a photo of it this morning. I actually re-listened to it on the treadmill today whilst making notes with like a piece of paper, trying to go like, oh, remember, reference this. And it was so chicken scratch scribble at the end that I have no idea what I was trying to talk about. But at least it's reasonably fresh in mind.
Well, before we dive into it, I think you brought up a good point, Brad, before we chatted on the call. Is this what is the merger? Because I think it's still a lot of people. Are you guys merging? Did you guys acquire World Triathlon? What exactly is it?
Yes, it's a great thing to jump into. A lot of people put out a merger. I guess, look, from a purely sporting fan perspective, it is a merger because it's bringing together 2 brands into one, right? So by the basic definition, that is a merger. From a corporate, mergers generally refer to M&A and corporate transactions and business and things like that. And so we have certainly not acquired World Triathlon. You actually can't acquire someone like World Triathlon. They're a non-profit, right? It's an international federation. And so what we have done at the most simplest of levels is take what we hope is the best bits of various parts, right? So take the WTCS, take the World Cups, take the T100 and a bunch more things that we'll announce next year and wrap them in a new entity from a commercial perspective. And what that business will do is commercialize triathlon, we hope, in a much better way than the sport has been commercialized so far. And what that means is sponsorship, media, marketing, whole rest, right? It's like the whole shebang of how do you market a sport?
That makes sense. Wow. Well, and how long has all this come together for? Just out of curiosity, a couple of years.
Yeah. To be honest, I think the first conversation probably happened, maybe not 2 years, maybe not as much as that. I think 18 months in the making of, would this make sense? Does it align with what World Triathlon wants to do? Does it mix with their strategy? A lot of this is based on a very, very good report that World Triathlon went and commissioned, to their credit, into the sort of status of the sport, which is the Deloitte report, which we can either reference in great detail or not at all, depending on how detailed you want to get. And what they did is went and sort of did an assessment. So I know there's been a bit of criticism from you guys towards Antonio, but to his credit, what he did as a new leader was almost immediately go and get a mirror to the organization and say, tell us what's going on, right? A mirror, that's a bad way of saying it, right? But get someone else to come and look at it and say, what's good, what's bad. And our conversations with them had been happening before then, but that process or that consulting review, whatever you call it, I think gave the validation that the sport needed some change. And this is one of the things that will come from that change.
By a bit of criticism, do you mean that Cass found it that his election was the result of corruption? That's the
so and maybe I shouldn't have thrown it out that way, because it then takes us into a rabbit hole, because I don't want to call you out and say
it's question number 1 we've got, by the way, so you were never getting away with that.
Well, I think I was sent prior questions. I don't think that one was included. So just to shoot you down straight away, that's not what Cass said. So I think you guys should be a little bit careful on how things get reported. Cass was related to broader election process, not whether Antonio was elected correctly or not. What was your question, Mark? I got through by the Cass bit. Was it just, do we believe in Antonio? Do we believe in World Triathlon? Or what was the...
No, it was just a defense of our negative reporting, that potentially there was some justification behind it. I guess what our listeners actually really probably most interested at the heart of the whole thing is how the events will look, right? Because most of our listeners are triathletes, and we can go back into the nuances it's slightly later on. But when it comes to organising these events, and you've got a mighty lot of them, and you're inheriting some brilliant events to sort of organise, how are you involved in that? Who is now organising on the ground registering for, etc.? Like,
Yep.
who maintains control of what elements, if that's all right?
Yeah, it's a great question. And look, and control is actually an interesting word that you land on there. Probably not necessarily intentionally, but like there is a distinction here between governance and commercials. And so, Pat, on your interview 2 weeks ago, whatever it was, sorry, your last podcast, you called it out pretty well about what the ultimate structure is. So this is World Triathlon taking, in fact, let me reference the Deloitte report, because like I've already talked about it, so I may as well sort of reference what the Deloitte report said. It basically said 3 things to World Triathlon. Firstly, it was you should separate governance from commercials, so politics from operations, which is not unique to triathlon. There are lots of other governing bodies that have gone through it recently where they just say that the commercial decisions of the business are being impacted by politics and it's not the right structure. So that was the first thing. And the outcome of that being go and find a commercial partner that can help you monetize the sport more effectively. So they could have gone and got a private equity firm. They could have gone and done something like that. They chose us instead because we are similar to a private equity sort of investor group in that we have access to capital, but we also have the capability, right? So we're actually building a team that could do these things rather than just being investment. So that was the first thing. But perhaps the more important was that the sport is fragmented, right? A relatively niche sport, which this is, and let's call it what it is. It's still a niche sport. And even if we grow at 10x, it's still going to be a niche sport. It's actually quite hard to understand, both from brands in the space. So SuperTri, Ironman, Challenge, PTO, WTCS, World Triathlon, but also competition hierarchy. So like, is a World Cup better than a WTCS? And is a world champion better than a World Cup winner? All of this stuff was a bit of a mess, frankly. And so that was one of Deloitte's sort of very key things, which we hadn't anticipated, to be fair. There was a very good observation by them as like a third party that's not in the space to tell the sport, hey, guys, do you realize you're all in the weeds here? You don't realize quite how complicated your sport is and how bad it is to sell to the general person. So certainly I found that as a very interesting observation. And then lastly, the commercial model. So both a mixture of, ultimately, the strength of triathlon is the fact that this is a sport that you don't do in the Olympic Games and then stop at the age of 19, 20, 21 when you finish university. Actually, in more often than not, you pick it up when you finish university and college, and you do this as an adult. And there are very few sports that do that. That is the strength of triathlon, and we need to lean into it more. And so I think, not to put words in World Triathlon's mouths, but they sort of went, oh, those are the recommendations. We need to pivot and change, build out a less fragmented calendar, find a partner that can help us commercialize and build mass participation into everything we do. And the result is the Triathlon World Tour. So look, a long winding intro to your question of like, what actually are the events going to be? The overall structure is that we will be delivering close to 100 events. We'll see how quickly we can get there. That's absolutely the ambition, but 100 events that will consist of, and this is the really important distinction, every event will have pro racing, which means prize purse, right? Obviously, so pros and prize purse. Every single one will have pro racing. Every single one will also have mass participation because we think it's integral to the commercial model. And then lastly, which is maybe the distinction to say an Ironman and other players in the space, every single event will also have a broadcast content component because we certainly at the PTO and World Triathlon now as our partners believe that's what's been missing in this space. You've got this ridiculously valuable, globally growing mass participation triathlon demographic, but it is fragmented by the lack of ability to reach that audience. And that's what we started with the T100, and obviously we're scaling up. So that's a lot to unpack. So I'll defer.
Yeah, and I think this, for me, this feels a little bit different than when Ironman bought Lagardère, roughly 10 years ago.
Yep.
And for a moment there, right, I think World Triathlon was really excited that, okay, we're going to bundle our broadcast with Ironman. And now potentially we've got this cohesive unit. Ultimately, that didn't work out. Andrew Messick effectively gave the media rights back to Marisol, who was the CEO at the time. Tell us how, you think it's going to be a little bit different and how this could be successful where it wasn't successful, that greater partnership wasn't successful with Ironman maybe 10 years ago, but now it feels a little bit different.
Yeah, look, great question, actually. And without me being, again, too unfair to them, that you kind of just hit on one of the key questions of the executive board of World Triathlon. So the reason why this has only been announced now is that this was a proposal and something that's been in the works with the commercial team. But they're a political organization. They have a democratic process. They had to vote on whether they believed in it. And that's what happened in Doha. So they had an executive board and it voted it. And one of the questions in that meeting that we were part of, and I don't think any of them will be offended by me saying this, was how is this different from what happened 10 years ago with Lagardère? Right? It's exactly what you just said. And the difference, I would say, is maybe slightly correct you on what you said. You sort of referred to it as the broadcast with Ironman and Marisol and the rest. I would say it was even simpler than that. I think their deal at the time was around, we have 8 or 9 events. Ironman's an amazing event operator. Let's put our events with them and happy days, and off you go. And the difference to now is this really isn't an events deal. This is not about us taking the WTCS and mixing it with T100. This is about us coming up with a completely new commercial model for the sport, where we give far more scale, ultimately, to the sport, right? And if we can do, I say if we can do, when we do, right? Obviously, there's some time to do it. 100 broadcasts with pro racing all around the world. We're then creating a platform that's big enough to really take the sport mainstream, and that's the difference. So.
Can you define broadcast? Like, are you going to do broadcasts on the scale that you guys just did this last weekend in Qatar? Like, you're going to do a broadcast that big for 100 events, so almost like 2 a week. That the whole year.
In terms of volume, yes. In terms of production scale, no. So we need to come up with a way. I should say we should come up with a way. There are many broadcasts that are not produced quite to the production level of the T100. But they're still okay, right? They're good for streaming, they're good for digital. And so what we are working on now is the people that are doing the T100 broadcasts, how can you create essentially like a B-level product that we can scale to another 80 or so events? And so I think we've said this in the interviews. Mark, I'll jump to you.
Just ask Ironman how they do theirs. That's the B tier of yours, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we'd like to create an engaging product as well as. That's one of the things that we'll go into. And look, and it's hard, right? And this is going to be a challenging piece for us to jump through, right? So there's one thing to deliver a broadcast with a very high budget. There's another to create an engaging broadcast on a lower budget in a more scalable nature in locations which are not so easy to get to, right? So some of the locations that we're picking up, this is not going to be the center of London or Singapore or something like that, right?
And Sam, I think this is probably one of the most common questions with respect to the broadcast that's come up. Do you see where we will be everything will be moved to Triathlon Live? So if we want to watch a T100, is it on Triathlon Live? Or do you imagine that come 2027, it's all going to move to a model much like the one that you have, which I think, look, we all love, right? I love that Qatar can happen in the middle of the night. I can sleep through it. And at 6:30 in the morning when I go and have my coffee, all I got to do is flip on YouTube.
Yep.
And the whole thing is there. And I want to commend you on that, because as a viewer, you've taken out so much friction in the process of how to actually just watch and consume your T100 races, right? And I think that it's important that we applaud you on that, because it is the easiest way to watch. You have the easiest races to watch.
And that's how you grow a sport, and it's sort of fundamental to it. So I should have said this before. We announced, when we announced this structure, we said, look, in 3 or 4 months' time, in Q1, so it'll be, and our intention is this is just before the first race of the year, we will release the brand, how does it look, some of the competition structure, some of those things. And that's when we'll comment on, like, is it all on Triathlon Live? Is it all on PTO Plus, et cetera, et cetera. So there are some elements I just want to punt. So I'll just say, hey, it's for Q1. But in general, a more sort of philosophical answer to your question, we need to grow the sport by getting as many people as possible to watch it. And that's not all about YouTube. YouTube is a very valuable part. Sure. But it's also, like, I'll use a good example, and a real example, because it's actually happening today, and it has happened for the last few weeks. We are now, and I'm not saying we're going to pull this off, but we are now talking to broadcasters about a 100 race offering all the way through the year. So it's not about take our 9 races and then there's WTCS. It's like we're going to major broadcasters and saying, you need to fill airtime. We want people watching our sport. We will provide you with essentially, what will it be? Nearly 400 hours of live content, plus shoulder programming, plus behind the scenes, all the rest. That's like, now we're talking like PGA, ATP kind of level numbers. And so the way we will grow it is not so much about like Triathlon Live versus YouTube. It's about getting broadcasters that go, wow, this sport is now ready for us to promote it. And that's how sport really grows. And that's how the athletes become superstars and all the rest. It's not by just us doing it. It's through the partners. And what we felt, and the consistent feedback has been this, is that the raw fundamentals of triathlon are there, but the sport still, even now with what we've been doing, lacks scale. And we have to build scale. And that's really the essence of what we're doing with the Triathlon World Tour.
And for a lot of people that are at home that don't really understand, you won't see a lot of the fruits of this labor until 2027, not 2026. Is that clear?
Yeah, I mean, I would, and the internet's going a little bit funny. Hopefully you're still getting me okay. I don't know if it's mine. I'm assuming it is mine. Unfortunately, you won't see any fruits of the labor until 2027. Yeah, so like we've announced it now that it's going to happen in 27, and the reason we have is because folks like you find out about it way in advance. So it's much easier to like get the news out and actually say, guys, this is what we're doing, so that we can go and speak to a ESPN or a BBC or a Qatar Airways or a United Airlines and be very open about what we're doing and not sort of feel like the sport will get all disrupted. So no, the first race that fits under this structure will not be until 2027, but obviously there is a ton of work that goes in between now and then. And obviously from an age group perspective, you don't sign up for races on the 1st of January for the year. Like you might sign up for it in May or March or April for the following year. So we'll be in market, as it were, as a brand from, I would say, late March, April. But the actual delivery won't be till 27.
And I'm guessing that obviously scaling up the sport is the ultimate way for your existing business model to be successful. That's kind of what this was built upon, scaling the sport up, super celebrity athletes, etc. But in the meantime, having a massive access to participation model of generating revenue is kind of giving you that in a nutshell, right? You're inheriting lots of races. Like Pat has said, the grand final has 6,000 people racing, things like that. How are you splitting revenue? So because obviously World Triathlon depend a little bit on that to fund some of their projects towards the Olympic teams and stuff. But clearly, if you're going to be taking a lion's share of the work, is it 50? How is it working broadly?
I did enjoy you asking whether I was going to be too politician and for a start, I'm not a politician, right? I run a business. So a politician is a democratically elected person that obviously relies on that. I'm luckily not elected in my role. I will be hired or fired based on the opinion of the chairman and the investors, which luckily a smaller group than a democracy. But I have no issues sharing that we have a revenue share. It's absolutely fine. And actually, I'll go a step further. This is actually a very, very clever model for World Triathlon as well, because what the PTO is doing essentially is coming in and taking all of the commercial risk with all of those events. So at the moment, World Triathlon operates events and they make some level of income, but if the events get cancelled, then that income disappears and they're responsible for it. What we've stepped in is to say is we want the rights to operate them, but the risk will be on us to deliver them. And what it will allow us to do, this is the very big distinction. It's not a criticism of World Triathlon in any sense of the word. World Triathlon as a federation is not financially set up to take risk, right? To invest more than ultimately their income, right? They money in from IOC and events. That's literally what they can spend. Partly because, as you said, Mark, they've got to fund athlete programs. They've got lots of other things beyond the events, but it means they can't invest in building the properties up. In contrast with our structure, we have investors. We're able to make losses or make investments, depending on which way you look at it. They're both the same thing, right? And so the model we have with World Triathlon is we're stepping in, operating those events. They're obviously going to receive a revenue share on it, but the main benefit they get is a group that is going to shoulder the risk and invest in the properties with the view that we can make it much bigger than it is at the moment. Now, if we don't, then that's an error on the PTO shoulder, on my shoulders, the PTO shoulders, like we've taken the risk and not seen the upside. But we obviously strongly believe in the progress we've had in 18 months that the T100, 2 years nearly, the T100 has been operating. We've gone from nothing to an established brand with multi-million dollars in revenue. And we think we can apply that to the rest of the events and ultimately take the sport to the next level. So there's both a commercial benefit there and then an overall sport growing, which benefits Ironman, it benefits you guys, benefits everybody.
And of course, if you scale it up and the revenue generated increases and increases and increases, even taking a smaller share of it, they could still see an increase in overall revenue taken.
100%. Yeah, dramatically more. So look, if even if we massively underperform, World Triathlon will be in a much better position they are in right now. If we perform the way that we believe we will and our investors will, then it is exponentially better for them. Because otherwise, what's the point, right? Like if we're going to go and take 50 million, 100 million, whatever the number will be, investing in the space, if it doesn't, then I'll be out of the job very fast, which I know you guys called for my head earlier in the year, but like I got a few more negatives.
we got to clarify. We got to Talbot.
No, Pat called for your head. We didn't.
We said executive, not we. That's more of a broad term. I don't want to mention names on here, but it wasn't in reference to you, but we'll leave it at that.
Okay. I have broad and rather thick shoulders and thick skin, so it's okay. I take it.
Sam, you've raised almost $100 million, right, in your time as CEO. So first off, holy smokes, we're trying not to swear here.
Yeah,
right.
That's insane.
You guys swear
for our sport. Thank you.
Well, we're trying to optimize our YouTube algorum, so we're trying not to swear.
Fair enough. I'll remember that.
So, I mean, first off, insane, right? I think you've done something that many people didn't think you were capable of, right? Ultimately, I reflect on I think in tight triathlon circles like this, there was a story of you meeting with the former CEO, Andrew Messick, and he said, "Hey, why don't you just do the commercial side of my business and operate and then broadcast product for the pros?" Did you ever think about coming back to the current CEO, Scott, and saying, "Hey, it's been a few years. I've raised a ton of money. I'm really good at this job. Is there a way that the T100 and Ironman could work together?" Was that something that you considered, or was World Triathlon solely just the only route that you thought to go at this point?
Oh, no, I think they're both very much on the table. I had breakfast with Scott in Marbella. I actually talked about maybe not quite that level of specificity. I think I said to him, look, if he's up for us operating their broadcasts and monetizing those rights, that could be an interesting thing in the future. In the short term, I don't think he sees any benefit in that, right? They're very much their own operation. Our conversation was more about how can we work together. I was fairly transparent with him with the things that were coming, maybe not to the level of 100 events, but had shared that, look, the PTO is going to go into short course, T50 is coming, et cetera, et cetera. And the main reason for going and having that conversation was to align on this is one of the best things that could possibly happen to Ironman in the market, right? Which I know you guys kind of talked about that on your podcast before, but that's my belief, and I hope they think it too. It might take a little bit of time for it to resonate, but yeah.
Look, I mean, you've been a leader in that space. You've been somebody that's really been pushing it forward.
Can I ask a more fun question then?
Yeah,
what's the distances of T50? Because I can't do the maths on it.
So that's one of my Q1 points when I said that some things I need to push to next year. But obviously 50 does not add up to 51.50. So there is a element of change coming.
The media release that's coming in Q1, is that going to be open to the public? Public can come to that?
Oh, I hope so. Look, there's a bit of we haven't actually decided when. Look, we may do it at. There's kind of three places where we could do it, right? So we can either do it independently at the first event of the T100 or the first event of WTCS. So those are the kind of three options. So that's Gold Coast, Abu Dhabi, or somewhere independent, which will probably be Lausanne or London. But yeah, it'll be a media event where we speak to the brand, the structure, and the competition schedule. So that's one of the things that we've been genuinely trying really, really hard to do. Like if we can in March announce our 27 calendar, then right, happy days compared to where we are at the moment. I was happy that we did it on, I think, December the 8th. It's better than the year before, but it's still nowhere near where we need to be, right? Like the sport needs to know when those events are happening. It needs to do it earlier. Formula One does it in June, so if we can do it in March and be ahead of Formula One, then we're doing our job.
We've heard a lot of references. There's a lot of things floating around. We do know there's T100 because it's an official race. We did see that there's T50. We know that some of your, I guess, a lot of this is nuanced, but your World Cups will kind of turn to like a Challenger series and things like that. Can you just maybe you can't answer it. Is there a T25? Is there a T200? Are we going to see these?
those are both logical distance to see at some point in the future. Yeah, there's a nice political answer. So not right now. In fact, maybe there's a more direct answer. So like not right now, but could in the future, maybe. I think that would be an interesting. You missed T1, right? So we have T1 next year. So we're going to go back to Leuven, we think, which is the event we did with World Triathlon before. We see massive potential in that product. It needs to be refined and tweaked, and there's a whole mass participation element around indoor, which I'm super bullish on. Not least because you see what's happening in High Rocks and there, which I think Mark, if I remember rightly, you're not a fan of. Maybe the others are a fan, if I remember rightly.
I think High Rocks is a wonderful product. I think it's a brilliant event. I just don't know why you can't wear a t-shirt. That's my extent of opinion on High Rocks.
So here's a sobering thing, which maybe people don't realize. I might be off by one factor on this. I think 5 times more people will do a High Rocks next year than an Ironman. And in an Ironman series races, like 70.3 and like the whole thing, you're talking 44 years of business versus 3. And so I'm not saying one's better than the other, but like there's clearly a very interesting movement there that we should be cognizant of as triathletes or as the triathlon industry.
I saw someone that High Rocks London, what was its ratio to the London Marathon runners? It was almost the country's largest mass participation event after being around for 3 years.
This is going to turn into a High Rocks podcast, but I will tell you exactly. It was 44,000 people in London because I was one of those 44,000 people. And it was very painful and I struggled to get around, but I wanted to learn from doing. And there are many things I think triathlon can learn, many things it can't do, right? Like there is a legacy and history and entertainment in this sport that will never exist with an indoor product. But anyway, that's, don't know how we got onto High Rocks, but
It goes to, though, we talked about this last week in our podcast. As you mentioned here, I think this is incredible for Ironman because this is a gateway, a T20. Not everyone can just sign up and go to an Ironman 70.3. There's a lot of these kind of baby steps, and I see a T50, a T25 getting into something like that. Will this be something that you look at? And if you listen to last week's podcast, you'll know kind of where I'm going with this. But like, will races across the country, all these kind of historical mom and pop local races that thrive on this sport, will they be able to license like that distance and call, instead of calling the international triathlon or the Olympic distance triathlon, will they be able to license like the name and stuff to say this is an official T50 event and it's going to be hosted on your website and all that? Or is this just through World Triathlon?
Yes and no answer to your question. So some events, so let's try and think of one that we're not talking to, but could be relevant. And if you don't mind, I'll make it relevant to Mark and probably nobody else. The Royal Windsor Triathlon that has been going for 25, 30 years. That is an amazing event, the history, and John Lund, who's like a legend in the sport locally, like created and is still like a local event. That could come to us and say, hey, we want to be a T50. Can we be part of it? We want to operate it ourselves. We'll pay a license fee. We'll have a broadcast. We'll have a prize money. Like, absolutely, right? There are ones that's the standard to do. This is not a strategy where we want a really local 400-person swimming pool-based event to say we want to be T50, right? So like this is about creating the highest level of professional racing in the sport, but it doesn't need to be all net new events, which is what I'm getting to. So like there will be some that are maybe old legends that have fallen on harder times, and I'm not saying Windsor is that. I'm just as an example of one I can think of that is local to me here. And then many of them will be new because we're going to go to places where triathlon was maybe in the past and isn't anymore. So part of this was, and again, maybe being a little political to talk about it this way, but I would argue that the WTCS series was better 10 years ago than it is today. And that's not necessarily criticism directly of World Triathlon. The market is bloody hard to put these things on. Sorry, your algorithm. It's really hard to do these, right? And it takes a lot of money and it takes a lot of political contacts and the rest. But for the sport to be where it needs to go, we need to be at the championship level. The top level events need to be in amazing markets that will embrace the sport, both from a spectator base, and I know you're going to get to it in a second, which is why I say that, because we can talk about Middle East spectators, but also financially and the product, right, to be exciting, right? So we need to go to places like that. So there will be a lot of effort on our part to create the championship level races. And I think this is maybe nuance we didn't touch on today. So Triathlon World Tour will consist of 2 competition tiers, right? It's championship level, which is the T100, WTCS, merged together, top tier, et cetera, and then this whole series of World Cups that are lower down, that are still professional racing, they're still age group, they're still broadcast, but delivered to a lower level that's maybe a bit more scalable for the cities that they operate in.
You've had some athletes this year, Hayden Wild and Morgan Pearson specifically, that have dabbled in kind of both distances. Has far as doing WTCS and a T100.
Yep.
Is in the future, is that something that you guys are just going to pair those both on the same weekend? Like,
No.
You'd hate for them to kind of pick and choose and be like, oh, I want to go do this WTCS because I got to chase my Olympic points, but also like I'm racing really well at the T100 right now. Like,
yeah. So in general, there may be a few exceptions to the rule on this because there always is, right? If you've got 100 events, we might have one or two that we may need to do for a different reason. But the general strategy is not that we're creating every weekend is T100 and T50 mixed together. It's that we're adding inventory to the market and scaling triathlon through creating exciting broadcasts and season-long content, not necessarily about making mega weekends. And look, there's a trade-off here because from a pure fan triathlon base, mega weekends are great. The cities that they host them in, it isn't great, right? It's just too hard road closure wise. And so you have to it's a really fine balance. So there'll be some places we do it, but in general, no, it'll be either T50 or T100 or something shorter.
Yeah. And Pat really kind of put the nail on the head, basically calling you a trailblazer on being able to raise money for triathlon and the sport. Something else that you guys were kind of trailblazers and leaders on is saying definitively, we're going to 20 meters and this is what we're going to have for our series. World Triathlon this last year even changed the rule book that said, hey, middle and long distance is now 20 meters. Can you kind of talk to why you guys decided to go that route and like kind of force the hand of World Triathlon to change those rules rather than just adhering to what they'd had?
So it's really genuinely not about forcing the hand. It's more about like working closely with a partner on like what's the right product for the sport, right? And so this is probably, we'll go into a little rabbit hole on governance and rules, but like, one of the criticisms I've had from pros, and one of the reasons I like coming on this podcast is I know you have a very strong pro following, or super fans that love the sport, and then basically every pro, anyone who's got a pro license is listening to this podcast, I guarantee it. So this is probably my best way to speak to the broader pro base than anything. And there was a fair bit of concern of like, oh, federation, governance, like regulations, we want to be independent. And we just view for triathlon, it's a niche sport. Like, that's just not the way to go. You need to work together to improve the sport and grow it, not fracture it. So look, with the money we had, we could have come out and said, you know what? Again, I was about to ruin your algorithm. Screw World Triathlon. We'll do it ourselves.
It's gone now. Okay, we'll kill this one, Sam.
We could have said, let's go and do it ourselves. Let's do a live golf, right? Let's break away and do our own thing and set our own rules. And we'll do a 22-meter after all because we think that's the right thing. And we just didn't think that was the right strategy to follow for the sport in general. It might have made my and Patrick, our CEO, and a bunch of other people's jobs easier because we could sort of play the rules by our own game. But we didn't think it was the right thing for the sport. What that now means, though, is governance sits with World Triathlon. We recognize that rules flow up to them, and there's a very close partnership, increasingly more close. Right, it's been close for the last 18 months, and we feel in a very good way. We obviously wouldn't have jumped in with 2 feet if we didn't feel that having had a partnership for the last 18 months that we couldn't work together for the next 20, 30 years plus. Right, but where I think it will get to is continuing to assess where the rules and the regulations fit versus the commercial need on like commercializing the sport, like selling it basically, versus the athlete voice, which is also a very important part of where we think we fit within the space, and mixing all those together, World Triathlon. So that's, I suppose, probably the overall attitude. To be fair to them, and I might be wrong on this, but you refer to us as a trailblazer on 20 meters. I think Challenge got there first. I think you would know maybe better than
they did back in 2013, but kind of you guys just standardized it for the series.
Yeah, we maybe took it to another level, but to their credit, like we would have got there from Challenge first, because they operated our first few events. So when we first went and did it, we would have gone, how do you do it? Okay, we like that. Would have spoken to our athlete board about drafting rules. They would obviously be vehemently in favor of it, and off you go. But to their credit, I think Challenge are the trailblazers there.
And Sam, I want to ask a really direct question about the rules, right? Because in 2025, I think you had the understanding is that you were paying, the T100 was paying a sanctioning fee to World Triathlon to conduct and hold the rules, right? Mm-hmm. And I think where our frustration grew as fans of the sport, right, is we're going to take the Hayden Wild example, right, where the shoe rules were not enforced. Period. We're not here to argue that they weren't enforced. Now, I could look at that on the outside and go, were they not enforced because there was a potential conflict of interest brewing where now there's an alignment between World Triathlon and your race series? And now moving forward, how do we know that the rules are going to be enforced, even when it might be a blemish on your product? The enforcement of them might be a blemish on your product, right?
So I'll answer in a different way. It's more like taking it back at like the sporting level. Every sport in the world will complain, as in the operators in the sport will complain about governance and rules and implementation, because it just is what it is, whether it's FIFA and VAR or it's FIA and Formula One. Like it's like complaining about rain in London. Like it is what it is. We're not going to stop it. You work with it and hopefully have a very strong relationship that it doesn't impede the sport. And that's where, look, I'm not going to say it's perfect at the moment. Yeah, this year we've had some annoyances there, but having a closer relationship between the athlete body, which is my easy way to tee up like what the PTO is as a next question. There you go. And the governance organization, we think is an important one.
So your message to the athletes would be, come to our races. We are going to enforce the rules in a predictable manner, and we want to ensure that the races are fair.
100%. Yeah. But I mean, I would say that regardless of World Triathlon, right? Like if we can't do that, then no one should come and do our races. Right? And that, to be fair, we do, that's the right way of putting it. We pass some of that, we absolve some of that to World Triathlon because we think they should be the governance, but it's on us to make sure that they govern us, right? It's a mutual way there. But yeah, if people can't believe in the integrity of the racing, then no one should come. And that's not unique to me. That's the same as Ironman. Why Ironman spends all the money that they do on anti-doping to their credit. They do it. It's not because they're great people who want to stop cheating in the sport. They do it because they want to have integrity. Because if they don't have integrity, no one will sign up. It's a very simple commercial model.
We've been on recently on this big push. Really, we try to listen to a lot of the athletes. We've been on this big push for the 20-meter draft rule, and putting a lot of pressure on Ironman. And some of the feedback we've gotten, whether it's from Ironman or our own investigation, is like Ironman adheres to World Triathlon's rules, and it's quite interesting now. And even was chatting with Lionel yesterday. Kind of even there was a test that was conducted yesterday with Ironman. They're testing this 20-meter stuff. But Lionel asked a question. He said, "Your competitors nearly write your rule book now, because as of right now, Ironman looks at World Triathlon's rules and then they make amendments on whatever rules they think needs a bit changing and things like that." So are you guys almost now working with World Triathlon and you're essentially even writing your own competitors' rules? Does that make sense?
That I hadn't thought about that. That'd be lovely if it was the case, because then one could do all sorts of interesting things if we help them. Obviously, World Triathlon are independent to us for a start, right? So it's not like we control World Triathlon. So that's the first bit. But secondly, and I think, look, I'm not the rules expert in this business by any such a long stretch of the word. I think you're actually slightly wrong, because I don't think Ironman takes World Triathlon's rules. I think Ironman takes the NF rules, the national federation that they operated in, and then in most cases has their own exemptions, right? Like they do things a little bit differently. And I do actually think that's a problem. Like, I think it's confusing that pros come to a T100 race, they go to Ironman, it's different. And so there needs to be some harmonization of the rules. Hopefully us getting closer and these kind of things can then lead to that. And hopefully, we touched on it before, right? Of how Ironman maybe will view what we're doing. Like, we believe it's a massive net positive for the sport. And so hopefully that begins to bring that sort of relationship closer together, rather than the animosity of like, oh, it's a competitor, definitely don't do it.
Okay, go see mommy.
It's good. Kids are all fine. Like, I don't have any here, but it's all good.
He's a no kids on screen.
Sorry about that.
Oh yes, MNSTRY got us chairman for the world. Yeah,
exactly. Can I ask about then? So the PTO has sort of disappeared a little bit this year in terms of a visible entity. T100 is the product, right?
Yep.
And I think you wanted us to ask this question with your last hint and the last one. So the new brand is, we don't know what yet. I guess it's not T100 because you have T50.
No, it's Triathlon World Tour as a name. You just haven't seen what it looks like yet. So that's cool. What the name will be. Yeah.
So now one company is Triathlon World Tour. Does the PTO still exist? And if so, what is it?
Yes. So, and thank you. It's a nice tee up, as I prompted. So the PTO does exist. We are UEFA to the Champions League for the people who are in this part of the world, or we are FIFA to World Cup to maybe the US audience is going to see that later in the year. So the organization is still there, but the organization isn't a brand name, and it's not something we're going to put any money towards. The reason why I sort of slightly hinted to tee it up, is the one bit which genuinely frustrates me. There's not many things that do frustrate me, but when I hear people say, oh, the PTO has gone from being an athlete organization, now they're just an event organizer, that it's not so much that it annoys me, it means that we're not communicating well, like what we're doing as an organization. So it's ultimately like self-reflective, because if you go back to the genesis of the PTO, which was the PTU, and it was a very subtle change, well, subtle, but very important, and to Charles Adamo's credit, as the original guy that helped sort of advise the athletes, was that a union can only lobby other people to make change, right? So a union goes and gets other people to pay them more or pay them less or change the rules. It's a lobbying group. And the feedback is, look, for a start, this is a relatively small sport. If you're a lobbyist, you're not going to have a big amount of change. But there's a model here. If you could own your own economic destiny, if you control your own economics, then you don't need to lobby other people because you can pay yourselves better, right? I'm speaking as the pros, right? To yourselves, right? As in to the pro body. And so the evolution of what we've done is just a continuation of that, right? That we need to make money for the organization, which ultimately pays for the professionals. And the way we do that is by putting on events. And so the comparison would be the PGA Tour and the ATP, both identical organizations to us, operate events, make money, pay the pros, prize money, et cetera, as opposed to, I'm going to use US examples and I'm going to get the name wrong. I think it's the LPA. Yeah, but it's not just the NBA, it's the NBA Players Association, right? That is a lobby group within the NBA, right? And so they just lobby the NBA to pay them better, right? And that was the distinction. So we didn't want to be a lobbyist. We wanted to own our own economics like the PGA Tour. And so when people say we become an event organizer, I'm like, yeah, no shit. Like, how do you think we were going to make money to be able to pay the pros? The one very big distinction, which I think is fair to call out, is that to his credit, when Charles put together the strategy, which was more than a decade ago now, right? For those who were sort of back right at the beginning, when he was out there schlepping around the world with these big investor decks and being like, we can change the sport, the rest. It was a time when media rights were at an all-time high and everyone thought that content was going to be monetized amazingly. And in the time that between he started and almost me starting, the whole world changed from a media perspective and the money all disappeared. Well, it didn't all disappear. I shouldn't say that. The money is now being attracted to just the top tier sports, and anyone that's second tier or third tier is under massive pressure. And if you don't already have media money, like, it probably isn't coming, at least in the short term. And so after 3 or 4 years of the PTO, maybe even less than that, 2 years of the PTO, we very much recognized that. And it was basically a choice. It was either like the fundamental business model of making money for the pros here doesn't exist anymore. So you either stop, or is there another model? And that's where mass participation really lifted up, because we're like, actually, there is an alternative. Now, the product is still events. Just the difference is how you make money from them, right? So we would have been an event organizer, whether we're making money from media or whether we're making money in other ways. We are making money in other ways instead of media. So
I got to tip my hat to you. Not only that you acknowledge that, but the fact that even earlier on this show, I noticed you said something that we won't be. This is a very niche sport. We will. We've said it for a while, and I think that for a while there was Charles. Charles was a pioneer in this space.
Yeah.
It is good to have visionaries, but I think that a lot of people have been involved. Like, we will never be the likes of FIFA. We will never be the likes of NBA, NFL, and all that. And so it's cool to see that you see that and acknowledge it, but then now have pivoted to make a more successful, I guess, events organization, which you can still make money through media and commercial entities. So, I mean, I think that is something that should be recognized.
Thank you. And look, and maybe just clarify the vision bit or the goal. We're never going to be NFL or NBA, but there's no reason why triathlon can't be as big as golf or cycling or Formula One. Like, Formula One was a niche sport in the US 5 years, 6 years ago, right? It was still niche. It's a massive niche sport, but it's still not NFL. Now, we will never be NFL or soccer, but the ambition of what we're creating here is that we can take triathlon to sort of golf level, which I think the turnover of the PGA is 600 million a year, and then probably 50-60% of that goes to the pros. Like, it's mega. That's where we think we can go. But we won't be 100 billion, which is what I think the NFL is. I think the NFL is 10 billion a year in media rights. Like, it'll never be that, but it could be 1,000 times bigger than we are now.
Yeah.
We've chatted a lot about 2027 and what that's going to look like.
Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about next year, what that's going to look like? Because you guys did make some changes going into next year.
Sure.
Obviously, the split genders, kind of take us through that decision to decide, hey, we're going to do it this way rather than the way we've been doing it in the past.
Yeah, and it's a really simple one. We can take as much time as you'd like to go into it. It really comes down to, like, what is the product of the sport? that ultimately we're selling, right? So very commercial conversation, but you're talking to a commercial leader. I'm not an operator. I'm not governance. I'm not politics. It's like, how do we go and make more money from the sport to ultimately do everything else we want to do? And that's about having a compelling commercial product. And what we felt was, not by anyone's fault, but like by sort of inertia, the product we were having with T100 wasn't commercially enough to take it where we want to go. And so let's be really specific. What I'm meaning is when you have a 6 or 7 hour broadcast because the races are back to back or slightly wedged together, it's practically Ironman, right? So it's the thing that we came along to say that we wanted to change, right? And so what we then need to move to is a model where, so that's one big problem. Secondly, is the feedback of the athletes, right? Is that they don't want to race 10 times a year. And we respect that. We're like, we get it. Right? You're all independent contractors. You go and choose what you do. We don't want to force you. But we also know commercially, because we have conversations every day with the people that will pay for the sport, it is not going to work all 4 or 5 events, not to the scale I talked about. Like, could we be bigger than we are? Sure. Could we be PGA style? No, not with 4 or 5 events. And so the pivot, I hate that word, frankly, because it's so overused, but the pivot was to say, well, let's learn from what the better product is. So we think a good product is a 4-hour broadcast, 4-hour spectator experience on site, like, basically one race. And all of our athletes are telling us that they don't want to race too much. So let's do alternate male, female. Hopefully we get the best of both worlds. And I say the word hopefully because if the one thing that we've gone out of our way with culturally is to be a group that learns and listens and takes that on board. At the end of the year, I think that we'll have shown we're getting higher quality racing with athletes who are less tired, in a product that I can sell better. I say the collective organization can sell better into better broadcast windows, which gets more eyeballs on the sport, et cetera, et cetera. But I guess let's see.
And Sam, again, I'm not tooting your horn here. You've aligned with a brand that has an amazing broadcast product, right? Already. So you don't have to try and, in my opinion, you don't have to try and fix that, right? That is an alignment where you guys already are doing it right.
Well, and again, I'm not going to be critical of our partners, but like, I don't think it's an amazing broadcast yet. I think if you look at the distribution we've got on the T100, it is more than any other part of the sport. We've done it in 18 months, not 20 years or not 40 years. And that's because of the way we're doing it with data and graphics and relationships and the rest. So it's not a case of just taking the two things and hoping it'll be better. Like, we need to invest in both of them. We need to put a ton of work into the short. I would argue, and maybe a little bit of a different view, but short course doesn't get the attention and glamour that it did 10 years ago. Like, when Mark and I were racing at university, the short course was the thing, and then you maybe did a 70.3 or an Ironman afterwards, right? And forward 10, 12 years, it's completely shifted. And that's because primarily of commercial marketing dollars and promotion. I don't think it's like a product thing. And so to us, it's actually putting investment and promotion into the short course racing, and we'll lift them both up together.
Man, I thought you were going to say primarily it's because Alistair Brownlee doesn't do it anymore. So.
That's exactly the answer. That's exactly.
That's also part of the strategy. So I'm going to announce it here. In 2027, Alistair is coming out of retirement, and we will see him at all 100 races.
I love Alistair, but he just got beat by an amateur athlete at Patagonia, man. So he has a lot of training to do.
Alistair is a venture capitalist now. He's busy with other things in his life.
Yeah. Can we talk about, I mean, it's obvious maybe to our audience and things that they've brought up to us. Like, are you concerned at all about going split gender? One, from kind of a cultural standpoint, I believe talking to some of the pros, they're like, I enjoy racing with the men, or I enjoy racing with the women. And then two, like, are you concerned at all about people maybe watching the women's race and not the men's race, or watching the men's race and not the women's race?
There'll always be, what's the word for it, like second order impacts to a decision. So we've done it for the reasons I explained, and there'll be like unexpected outcomes from that, which we don't know until we try it. Which is why I'm saying we're not going to do it forever. Like, we're going to see if it works. We feel, obviously, because we wouldn't have done it, the net positives outweigh the negatives, right? Yes, there are some pros that are in couples that are now annoyed that they won't come, but that's like 5 athletes out of like whatever, right? So like, there's an element that we've had to sort of factor in, and we'll just have to see how it goes.
Well, those 5 athletes are the public couples. I think behind your scenes at your events, there's a lot more than that. So.
I have no idea. Yeah.
Sure. So I can ask a question then. You say that they are second order effects, but you're a smart guy and you can predict and research and brainstorm second order effects. Are you able to ignore some of those second order effects for next year because it's actually just a stepping stone year to get you to 27 where you want to be? Like, what's the risk for you next year? If it goes terribly, does it actually matter? Are you all financially teed up and ready to launch your product in 2027? Are you basically just biding time, or is there actually some pressure still to deliver next year a product?
Oh, it's a great question. I hadn't thought about it that way. There is there's pressure on a daily, not even a daily basis, pressure on a monthly basis of just commercializing the sport. If we do a terrible job commercializing the sport next year, it will hurt us massively selling the expanded tour the year after. So it's not like we can just go rest on our laurels and just cruise through the year because it's the year after. Where, look, if it doesn't work, it will cause us to go and change the competition structure of the 2027, and that will be disruptive. So I very much hope it does for T100. At least at the moment, we're not intending to do it on the shorter course racing because it's shorter and you can achieve what I said earlier with the 4-hour broadcast and road closures and the rest. But I think we've got to just see how it goes and how it does resonate. I would love to get to the point way into the future, and this will be a long time away, that we could have enough road closures that we do every T100 has 4 hours men, 4 hours women on separate days. So that's the really important part, right? Because it's separate days, it's different broadcast. It's not the long piece. It's not a, but as we all know, because, Ironman's in the space, they've done this for a long time and they're very good at organizing events. There are precious few locations where you can do back-to-back racing in that way. And we need to do it not only in arse fuck nowhere events, we need to do it in the middle of Singapore, and we need to do it in the middle of London, and that's where the pressure really comes from a road closures and sort of permitting perspective.
Can you, just because you hinted on it, can you give us how the fans should be thinking about these races that happen in the Middle East, where visibly, right, it's striking where there aren't a lot of fans, right? But that's still, we understand that there's a ton of impact there for those races to happen. But how should we reconcile that when we're watching?
Yeah, no, and I did. I teased it on purpose, right? I don't shy away from some of these things. You guys referenced it on the last podcast or the podcast before. And there's probably one important clarification, and that's more on us. It's how does the product work? Because if I can tell you, for those who actually came to Dubai or to Doha, we had thousands of people who came over the weekend. They were not visible when the broadcast was on because by that time, the heat of the day, they've gone home to rest and the rest. And I think it was Talbot. It was really interesting. I didn't know this before, but it shows how closely Iceland. You referenced that the 20th place in Kona and there was no one there, right? It's the same dynamic in our races. Oh, sorry, I said that the wrong way. If that's happening in Kona after 46 years, who are we to expect that we're going to get crowds in Doha in year one? So I think part of that is also making sure that we have a structure where we encourage crowds, we make it easy for the fans that have come to race the next day, don't feel exhausted by the process of watching, that it's in the middle of the heat of the day, et cetera, et cetera. And that's something for us to go and figure out, right, with World Triathlon on the right way to do it. And that's sort of the first part, because if I use... give you specific numbers. We had nearly 10,000 people turn up on the Wednesday evening for our kickoff run in Doha, and I would say probably between 5,000 and 6,000 on Sunday. It was much less than that, obviously, on the Saturday because it was pro only. But those raw people, if we can get them to be coming when the pro race is on, then hey, we've got no issues at all. So there's an element of us learning, and then secondly, and this is more specifically to the Middle East, but actually not massively different in other parts of the world, it's also recognizing that this isn't yet a sport that will naturally draw spectators and fans outside of a super diehard fan base. And so it's accounting for that in how we build the broadcast, because broadcast with tumbleweed going through doesn't look good for anybody, right? Trust me, we know that more than anyone.
And look, and we've got to give you credit where it's due, right? You bounced back from the debacle in Dubai, right? What happened? What happened? Yeah. What happened in Dubai did not happen in Qatar, right? So as far as the product is concerned, the way that you guys delivered the broadcast in Qatar, I thought was perfect, right? You get an A+ from 3 weeks previous, 4 weeks previous.
Yeah, that was a shit show. So yeah,
it was bad. So I think you corrected that, and I think that's probably where it's got to start, right? And you go, okay, let's learn from that and move forward, and then the rest will come. So,
and look, the debacle in Dubai is another good example where, again, that the men pro race was obviously terrible and it reflected very poorly on us. We were very disappointed for what it meant for the sport and in front of stakeholders, et cetera, et cetera. On the Sunday after, that was probably the best attended race I've ever been to. The way that the Emirati UAE community got behind watching the age group race was wow, what a validation for what we're doing, right? Maybe that's the right way of putting it. The way where the ingredients in the cake, maybe we're not getting it the right mix yet for the right product, if that makes sense for everyone as a comparison. But we need the raw ingredients are there. That's the better way of saying it. We just got to put them together in maybe a slightly different way to what we've been doing in some locations, right? On the Gold Coast, this is another good example. We're not doing it like, again, up the street in the Gold Coast. The event takes place in Surfers Paradise on the high road. Of anyone here who's done a gap year and gone through Australia, again, I'm probably referring to Mark, will know exactly what I mean by the place, right, on the Esplanade. And that'll bring crowds with a different kind of lens to, say, doing an event in the Middle East. So different horses for courses, depending where you are.
The course thing's probably slightly less relevant for the 50s because you can just bang it in the middle of the day and have age group racing before and after on the both days, etc. And then you just naturally have people racing at the venue at that day. A bit like we've often cited it. The best one you've done is still Milwaukee, right? Where you had the USA age group championships both days. It looked wicked. The crowds were great. And I guess this avenue gives you that guaranteed athletes around to help make your product look a little bit more popular on the screen, right?
Yes and no. So I would say yes if you have lots of athletes that go to the T50s, but actually less people do short course than they do long, and so we've got to bring more age groupers into those races to be able. So yes, I guess in answer to your question, but it's sort of unfortunately not quite as simple as that. But that's why we're investing with World Triathlon on it. We really believe that short course triathlon can get back to maybe where it was, alongside long distance triathlon, and merging the two things together. Because let me use a good example of how this came about. Meeting with a broadcaster like the BBC and explaining who we are, and they're like, so your T100 that I've heard from these World Triathlon guys, there's this super tri thing, like, and there's Ironman too. They're like, oh fuck, I can't deal with that, right? Now it's the Triathlon World Tour. This is what we've got. This is what we're selling. It just makes it so much easier for the sport to grow in a crowded, competitive market of other things people can do.
Another seismic change for next year is upgrading the amount of pay that you're getting per race. However, the overall series bonus is a little bit lower. I know some professional athletes that I've talked to have said, like, well, I'm cool with doing a couple of the races, but it doesn't really incentivize me to do the full season since the prize money is much lower going forward next year. What's kind of your rebuttal to that?
Well, it's less a rebuttal. It's more like now these changes probably make sense to people. So like I'll use both the prize money changes, but also like us turning London into a WTCS. Now everyone's like, oh yeah, now I get what you're doing. Whereas when we announced that, people are probably like, what on earth? It's like it's their best T100, and all of a sudden they're making it short course. So there is a bunch of things that have obviously been in motion that now the context probably makes sense, right? Of having the prize versus where they are, the series prizes that are maybe aligning more with what's happening in the short course sport, because it's a bigger thing together, which we appreciate. And we knew we would have about 2 or 3 months of people like scratching their heads going like, are these guys drunk? Like, what on earth are they doing? Right. But now hopefully it all makes sense that there was a strategy behind it all, and we've got to now go and deliver on it to take the sport to genuinely way bigger heights. Like, I mean, I used to give him shit, frankly. Our chairman, when we launched the T100, Chris, came out very strongly in saying, we're going to make this a top 10 sport in the world within a few years. And I'm like, scratching my head going like, really? You've said that publicly? But like, that generally is the view that we could do that with this. Now, it won't happen next year. It's going to take a bit of time, but we think this is the platform the sport needs to go to super heights.
I always thought as well with the prize money thing, athletes moaned extensively that they couldn't possibly do that many races and they only want to do 4 races. And I think when you put the prize money in for the series, maybe, I don't know what you forecast you thought most athletes would do, maybe 6. I don't know. Maybe they would do 6. If you don't want to race as many races, don't then moan when the series prize money at the end is less. You turned up less. You did less races. You get less pay for a series. You didn't buy into doing a lot of races, so the series naturally loses a bit of value. Was that at all part of it?
Certainly, we learned a lot. Yeah, we learned a lot last year from the structure of what we thought worked and what didn't, and we're implementing hopefully as many of the things we think will be better for next year. But again, I sort of use this as another way of reminding people, like, it's test and learn, it's iterate. Like, that's the culture we've had since the beginning. It's not perfect yet. We think we're doing a solid job on the events. We're getting to the place where they need to be. Are they perfect? No. Are they significantly better than where the sport was a few years ago? Yes. And it's going to take time, right? And hopefully the community backs us and supports us with the vision that we've got, because if they don't, this won't work. So that's why, we have conversations like this, because it is generally about that.
We ended the podcast giving you guys a grade for this year, for 2025. What grade would you give yourself?
I should have thought of that in advance, actually, given you doing it the other day.
Did you think
We're
Pat was
supposed-
harsh with the C minus? I thought that was really.
No, I would say.
Considering
Look,
how much he sucked up to you here, I thought that was harsh.
I think if you took, I'll answer in a slightly different way. Is that if you just look on, if at the beginning of the year we had said the events we were going to do, and then we delivered them to the level that we had, I would say probably we're a B plus. Like, it's not great, but it's not horrendous yet. The fact that we had to make changes and do those things takes that down to a C for sure, right? Even a C minus potentially, because it's just disruption, right? The actual events that we delivered, I thought consistently, without, other than the debacle in Dubai, was taking the sport to where it needed to go. But when you do that through the lens of people thought they were going to Vegas and they end up in Wollongong, then you got to take some grades down, right? So that's how I would view it.
We before we close out here, we would love to get you back on in the spring, because we did hear through some rumblings that there's a lot more to be announced. a lot more. So you wanna hint at any of that? Give you a little opportunity.
Well, no, I think I've already said, right? So in Q1, we're going to be making a bunch more announcements. There's going to be a bunch of structure around it, about what it means. We needed to get this news out now to tell the sport where we're going, to show, the conviction of what we're doing. But this is, I mean, I've said it before, maybe said it with you guys maybe 6 or 9 months ago when I last spoke to you all, like, it's a golden era for the sport, and it's going to get a hell of a lot more golden with the things that are coming.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for your time, Sam. And we are, we're looking forward to it. And thanks for giving us, coming on and chatting about the merger.
You're welcome. To see you on the Triathlon World Tour in 27, or at the T100, the TTS, and the World Cups in 26.
We'll see you in San Francisco.
Right. Yeah, good stuff. Thank you.
All right, we just finished up with Sam Renouf and wanted to kind of just chat as a team after. How do you guys think that went?
I mean, that was his best interview he's done with us yet, right? Where he wasn't, he wasn't
playing dodgeball,
ducking, dodging, diving, dipping. I mean, he answered some questions, right?
Yeah.
Mark, do you think so?
Yeah, totally. I texted the group straight away afterwards saying I actually think he's been really good there. Like, he gave answers to every question that, like, added context to the question, the details. It wasn't skirting around it, and I think that's because he actually has something good to say. He's got a deliverable now, that we're not just challenging him on stuff we don't like about his product. He's telling us about something they're doing that's completely new in the sport, and I think that shows. I think I imagine, like, he feels really good about having you just massage his ego there, Pat, for an hour. That must have been really nice for him.
Look, here's the thing, right? He has raised some money, and I said this on last week's show. I'm going to say it again on this week's show. I start to think now, if you're continually underestimating Sam, you're going to be gravely mistaken. I mean, the dude has found some money. And I just think, at the end of the day, you've got a group like World Triathlon. They could see this. They have a business where I think they've got a great product as well, but they realize, like, they stalled out. And this was an opportunity to make something new of it. I still, here's the big problem, right? Is 5 years ago, they said, hey, we're never going to be an events organization. We're going to be a media and a broadcast product. Now they've changed. They said, hey, we got to lead with events, and then we can sell that as part of our entire portfolio. And to me, I still want to think of a world where there can be harmony between World Triathlon, Ironman, and the T100. I still want to live in that fantasy world where I think that there could be a true giant and one group that's doing it all. And I think, my biggest fear is that they can't pull the events off.
Yeah, I guess that's the big worry. I will say I thought it was good. I think that's the first time I've heard him really address the transition from union to marketing triathlon to being a mass participation events model. Honestly, like, we tried that. It didn't work. It was ambitious. We weren't drawing in the revenue we needed. This is the obvious next natural progression. It was nice not to dodge around it or pretend it's always been the plan. I know what you mean, that I wonder how many races they're going to start with in 27 and what the implication of any of those really failing is, because triathlon is still quite small. And all the other events basically come about by the small ones. They start tiny and they grow as they get better. And then Ironman is this big beast that started with a bunch of events that started like that, got bigger, and they can organize them. If you lose 3 of your 10 races, you lose a lot of your audience, and they don't come back because they go to Ironman, they go to Challenge, or they go to High Rocks. So the pressure to actually execute organizing those races in 27 is going to be extremely high.
But I mean, there's a need for them, right? I mean, these Ironman races are plump full. You can't get into any of them. So all of a sudden, if there are
Totally.
10 new events in Europe, and it's a gateway where they are an hour long instead of 4 hours long. I mean, this is for an elite, right? If they're an hour and a half long instead of 6 hours long for a half Ironman, for most people.
Well, even
Does
for
it? Does it?
age groupers, like
That's what I'm saying. As an age grouper, it's much more approachable to go do a T25 than it is to go and do a half Ironman.
right. Like I'm sitting here and I'm like, well, Ironman Frankfurt's full, but I could hop on a train and go do the T100 in Spain and race with the pros, and like for a fraction of the price. So I think that Sam was really good. I agree that he was a lot better this time than we've had him on basically every year since we started the podcast. So I feel like it's good that we're not finally getting answers, but like Sam's not scared to answer some questions now as far as like what's
I mean, I just think he's got momentum on his side.
Yeah. I think I wish I would have asked him more so about like the concerns about like the debacle in Dubai, them having to change event calendars and things like that, and now them inheriting all these events. But I mean, I'm sure he would have said, "Let's see what happens." So don't underestimate him.
I tell you what, as well, I just looked up his results. He did all right in London High Rocks too.
I can't believe we started talking about High Rocks. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm gonna fall out of my chair."
He's got to work on his BBJ a little bit, and he had a bit of a mare on the wall balls. But running, he's been putting in some running, as Sam.
Yeah, no problem.
Fair play.
Good on him. Okay. Yeah, I mean, okay. So where do we go from here? Do we just get some popcorn out and we wait till Q1? I mean, what do we think?
Yeah.
I was making my schedule for 2026 and what races I want to go to and things like that, what live shows we want to do, because more people have been asking like, hey, we want a further notice of what all events you guys are going to be at. And I've been toying with the idea of going to both San Francisco and Vancouver, the T100 races, just because like we didn't get to go to any of those events this year. It just conflicted with everyone's schedules and things like that. So I feel like supporting them in that sense will like kind of help not only our audience but also the sport.
I think it gives us a bit more balance as well, because we are quite Ironman heavy, especially with the events we attend. I'd like to go to a couple. Yeah, I didn't even make it down to London, did I? I don't think. I mean, I'd love to go to some of their events. So we should tee up. We should try and do 2 live shows. Why don't we just now commit? We're going to do 2 live shows at least. We're going to do live shows at least 2 T100 events.
Yeah, that's fair.
Pat, can we have the money to do that, please, Dad?
Yeah, I can give some allowance for that.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Okay, great to recap that. I guess we still got a show this weekend. We're going to do our award show this weekend, so we got a lot to cover.
But I think Mark has to present since he's going to be podcaster of the year or whatever. So
am I still winning? We thought we might get Jillian across the line.
No way, she's not going to close the gap to you. You got over 50% of the votes.
I've had a big surge though. I'm no longer in last place.
No, now I'm in last. I got a full-time job. I can't deal with this stress of being in last place.
Are you okay with pity votes, Pat? Because you basically asked for pity votes.
I don't care.
I got them. I'll take them.
That's good. Well, thanks for listening to this podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a review. Repost it on your Instagram. It helps us a lot. It helps the algorithm a lot. So appreciate you listening to not only this show, but all of them this year. And we look forward to one last one before going on break. So thanks for listening. We'll see you soon.